Hello. Welcome to I Can See Clearly Now. My name is T.R. Carr. I will be hosting this podcast and several follow-on podcasts focusing on the issues that we face in local government, public policy here in Southeast Michigan and in the wider region. One thing I would say is that my experience has been such that I'm a retired professor. I taught at Texas Tech University. I've taught at the University of Arkansas, and I'm retired from Southern Illinois University. So I have a lot of academic experience, but I don't want to make this podcast an academic lecture. What I want to do is to focus on what it means to be a resident, what it means to be a citizen, and have a meaningful impact on the political process. As such, I'm the retired mayor of Hazelwood, Missouri. I served 3 terms, 9 years as mayor of Hazelwood. I was a president of the St. Louis County Municipal League, and I was also served as the chairman of the Public Policy Committee for the Missouri Municipal League. I was also the vice president of the St. Louis County Police Board. We managed 1,000 uniformed officers and some 250 civilian individuals. Here in Southeast Michigan, I have served on the City of Farmington Hills Economic Development Corporation Board. I was the president. I'm currently vice president. So my experience reflects a breadth of experience dealing with local government, dealing with residents and their concerns across the United States. So what I want to do today is simply just to focus on some issues that we face. The first thing I want to talk about is us as residents. We're in a political season. We're in an election process here in Farmington Hills. And some things to think about. What is our role? What is our responsibility in politics? One thing we can say is that we are privileged to live in a democratic system. But that means that we have the ability to have a direct voice into policy decisions, program decisions that affect our daily lives. It affects the education of our children. It affects the roads we drive on. It affects the jobs that we have. So we have a unique freedom that not everybody has. Now, consequently, this means we have certain kinds of requirements and experiences that it's incumbent upon us to do. First thing I would say is that sometimes during an election season, we tend to have maybe what is best described as an aversion to the political process. How often have you heard people say, our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues at work, I am just tired of politics. I am just tired of the political discussions. I just want people to make the right decision. Well, we have to understand, what is politics? Politics is best defined as who gets what, when, where, and how. So if politics, if that's the right definition of politics, and it is, then politics determines the streets we drive on. It determines the schools that we send our children to. It determines the economic climate in which businesses choose to locate or not to locate in our city. It chooses the level of police protection we're going to have. It chooses the number of firefighters that are going to be on call to provide EMS services to us. So politics governs everything. And if we choose not to be involved, those very critical services are in fact left up to somebody else, and we don't have a voice in it. So we are in a unique political system which requires us to be involved. In fact, we might go on so far as to say that it's an obligation. It's a call. I will use that term through our podcast periodically, saying we live in a democratic system, and therefore as residents, as citizens, we are called to be involved. We are called to have an active role in the political process. Now, what does that mean? It means that we're called to be involved in local political campaigns. We're called to be involved in state level political campaigns and are also called to be involved in federal level political campaigns because our life is governed. Our life is impacted by decisions made at those three levels of government in the United States. And so what we want to do is to be able to have a positive impact on our system. Now, in order to understand this, let's just step back and take a look at how we do our own involvement in political systems. What's our involvement? Well, let's deal with the lowest level. There are a number of our friends and neighbors and relatives who might qualify as being disengaged when it comes to a political campaign or a political process. They're not involved. They have no interest in being involved, and they will leave the decision-making process to somebody else. So the disengaged consists of a significant proportion of the American public. They are not involved. They don't care. They're largely apathetic. Our call is not to be disengaged. Now, the next level are the non-voters. These are individuals who pay attention to some political campaign literature. These are individuals who may read the newspaper or follow newscasts and be aware of different issues that are facing our community or our state, but they're not going to vote. They will leave that decision to somebody else. So we have two categories of people that we are not called to be a part of. We are not called to be disengaged, nor are we called to be a non-voter. Well, what can we do? What is our basic responsibility? Well, the next broad category of individuals are what we call voters. These are individuals who choose to show up at an election booth on voting day and to cast their ballot, or they will mail in an absentee ballot. They will participate in the political process by voting. And you'll see people wearing little signs, "I voted today." And that's a good thing to do, but we have to ask ourselves, is that what we're called to do? Are we called just to vote and then to leave everything else to other individuals, to candidates, to political parties, to other activists in the system? I think not. The last category that's been used, this category comes out of some, political science literature. So it says the last category is a gladiator. Now, what is a gladiator? We think about it in the Roman Colosseum times. A gladiator in the political process, the first line to do is somebody who donates money. If you donate money to a candidate, if you donate money to a political party, you have taken the first step to being a gladiator, which means I want to have an impact on the political process. I realize it costs money to run a campaign. It costs money to publicize my positions. It costs money to achieve name recognition, to convince people to vote for a particular candidate or a position. So giving money is the first step in being a gladiator. Next steps involve working for a campaign. Working involves several levels. It can be securing yard signs to put in our own yards, to put in our neighbors' yards, to post yard signs supporting a particular campaign. A next level is to volunteer for the political campaign, for the candidate. You work, you will do mailings, you will host coffees, teas, cookouts, so people can meet the candidate and understand the issues. So there's multiple levels of being a gladiator. So let's understand, and when I talk about gladiator and things that being a gladiator, giving money, working for the campaign, putting out yard signs, hosting campaign events, coffees, barbecues. What we're really doing is we're not fighting, we are in fact working. One thing that really is kind of counterproductive in our political system today is people saying, I will fight for you. I will fight for your rights. No. What we want to do, the real call on us as participants and on campaign candidates is to work. I will work. I will not fight. Because if you fight, you lower politics to a schoolyard competition between kids arguing about who gets the bat first, who gets to play on a particular piece of equipment. So we don't work, we don't fight, we work. It's really critical to understand and to bring that orientation with us. I'm not going to fight with my neighbors. I'm not going to fight with people who have a different opinion. I'm going to work to show why I believe what I do, why I believe this particular candidate or this particular public policy position is the appropriate one. We don't fight. Fighting is counterproductive. Using that word is counterproductive. And using that word divides us as a community. It divides us as a state. It divides us as a nation. So let's stop using that word fight. Let's use the word work. I will work. And if you work, we know that in work, sometimes you make compromises. You're trying to get everything done. You have competing tasks, and so you will compromise with your neighbors. You'll compromise other people. So when we work, we're willing to achieve a product, and at the same time, it means we compromise. If we fight, we don't compromise. And our political system really hinges. It really is built on the concept of compromise and working together. So what does this mean to be an American? What does it mean to live in a democracy? We are committed to working. We are not, and we are aversive to fighting. So citizens must work to be informed about candidates. Citizens must work to be informed about public policy issues. This is our call. This is the cornerstone of a democratic system of government when we spend the effort to learn, to understand how we can have a meaningful impact on our system. Now, let's just kind of shift gears for a moment. What I would like to do is to say, if we're going to work, what is the model that really best describes an informed and active citizen? Now, we talked a little bit about, in political science terms, if you give money, you qualify up to being a gladiator. Well, that does imply a little bit of, you're ready for combat, but really just means that you're prepared. So let's think about what should be our model. What could be a meaningful role for us in the political process? Well, I remember reading about the issues of graft and corruption in some of the ancient empires. And in one of the Eastern empires, they had individuals whose task was to discover corruption and graft on behalf of the government. And they were known as people who would ferret out graft corruption. So I like that term. I think that our job, our role as a citizen is to emulate that of a ferret. Now we say, well, what is a ferret? What characterizes a ferret? Well, first thing, a ferret has very high energy. If you've looked at a ferret, if you've held one or played with one, these little critters, there's no bound on their energy. They will be everywhere all at the same time. So if we're going to be an informed citizen, we're ferrets. We have a high level of energy to understand and to know what's going on in our political system. At the same time, ferrets are very, very inquisitive. They want to know what's inside that box. They want to know what's around the corner. They want to know what's in a dark room. Ferrets are inquisitive. And so as we look at this, we say, well, as an informed, active voter, I am to be inquisitive. My call is to be inquisitive. Now, inquisitive means you don't sit back and allow information to come to me. A ferret does not sit back. A ferret explores. A ferret discovers. A ferret satisfies its own curiosity. That means we're inquisitive. We don't simply rely on the media. We simply do not rely upon campaign literature, but we will go a step beyond so that we can understand and inquire what are the consequences. Ferrets, another characteristic is that they explore dark corners. If you have a box, if you have a dark corner, a ferret will be there in a nanosecond because they want to know what's there. What is hidden? Is there something hidden that they need to know about? So as a ferret, we have high energy, we are inquisitive, and we were willing to explore what we call the dark places. We'll end up backgrounds that may not be readily available. We will seek it out. And so that we know what's behind the door, what's inside the box. If there's anything hidden that we need to know, because it may be that there are certain segments of a policy decision that for whatever reason is not being publicized traditionally. We will find that out. That's our goal. Ferrets have a mind of their own when it comes to a task. Ferrets are, if you're going to have a ferret for a pet, you have to be willing to spend a lot of time to train it, to work with it, because ferrets do have a mind of their own. If somebody has a dog for a pet, the dog, you can train them, the dog will come and go and play fetch. Ferrets have a mind of their own. They're going to find out that information. If you tell them no, they're going to discover it anyway. In political processes, when we're looking at candidates, we're looking at policy issues, we can look at everything. What this means, we can look at if we're dealing with a candidate, we can look at their social background. What have they done? What have they not done? What groups are they involved with? We can look at their professional background. What careers have they followed? What have they done? What have they achieved in their career? We can look at their academic, their achievements. We can look at their experiences, a variety of areas that we will look at. And so that's what we do, because that's what a ferret would do, and that's our call. So as we look at this, we're saying we've covered a number of topics, so far. We have looked at what is our call? Our call is to be involved. What is our role? Our role is to be that of a ferret. So we find out information so that we don't make mistakes when we cast our ballot. We don't make mistakes when we select a candidate to work for. We don't make mistakes when we decide which policy position we're going to follow. Most policy positions are very complex. Most candidate positions are going to be complex. But we want to be informed so that we can understand. Remember, we're not fighting, we're working. And as we work to understand, and we know that what are the points where we can compromise, and what are the points where we really can't compromise. So that's what we've looked at in terms of that. Now, I'd like to shift our focus on our podcast, If I Can See Clearly Now, to another really significant issue. What do you want to know about a candidate? Now, have you ever gone to a Meet the Candidate forum? When candidates for public office, multiple candidates are invited, and they're invited to answer questions from the floor. Let me begin by saying, and this is a value judgment on my part, I'm not so sure how helpful they are. They are helpful in that you get to see the candidate. They are helpful in the way that you can hear what the candidate has to say. They are helpful that you may be able to see how the candidate can think on their feet when they're asked questions that they really weren't expecting. But it's a limited utility. So I'm saying, it's not that we should not have them, but we should understand that it's not especially helpful. Now, let me give you a couple of some what I will call as bad or really inappropriate questions that can be asked. I attended a candidate forum for candidates seeking office of mayor, office of city council. One question that was asked, now, currently there is a national debate, national issue dealing with healthcare and dealing with the issue of vaccines and medicine. That area is one of, for the national government, Centers for Disease Control, and for our state governments to be involved in. But at this particular Meet the Candidate Forum, one question that was asked was, what is your position on vaccine policy? The candidates looked at one another and they began to talk about how they supported vaccines. Well, let's just stop and think and reflect. Does that question really help us elect a local official? Because vaccine policy, healthcare policy originates and is governed by the federal government for the Centers for Disease Control. It's governed by our state governments. It is not governed by municipalities. Let's just think about this for a second. If you ask that, do you want your municipality to have an active role in vaccine policy or immunization policy? In Michigan, there are 276 cities. In Michigan, there are 257 villages. In Michigan, there are 1,240 townships. There's a total of 1,773 governmental units at the local level. It is not appropriate to have 1,773 different vaccine policies, different healthcare policies across one state. Now, if you look at that nationwide, look at the state in which we live. There may be multiple local governments, county governments, special districts. Those entities are not equipped and they're not assigned the responsibility for determining vaccine policy and many other healthcare issues. So when you ask a question, one of the first things to ask is this an area in which local government has responsibility? It may have no responsibility at all. Another question that was asked, which I think is, we would label it as a inappropriate or even a bad question, is, what are you going to do about educational achievement? So the background is evidently the person believes that the schools are having some educational problems. Quality is low, whatever. So they ask elected officials for municipal government, what are you going to do about it? It's really an inappropriate question. Because if you look at education in the United States, education is governed by local school districts, state boards of education, so the state legislature, and the federal government has a role. So we look at this and say, well, what is the role of a city official, a city council member, a mayor to deal with educational achievement? The answer is nothing. Because schools are governed by school boards that are elected independently from the city council. School boards have their own administrative structure. They have their own tax structure. Everything is totally and completely separate from local government. Now, an exception is in some large municipalities, such as the city of New York. So everything may be integrated into one governmental entity. But here in the United States, typically speaking, education policy, schools are independent from municipal government. So that means if I have a concern about school policy, about educational achievement for my kids, where do I want to go? Do I want to spend time questioning local city officials, or do I want to start attending school board meetings, get to know members of the school board, get to know the superintendent? That's where those decisions are made. So don't ask questions that are really inappropriate. That's why I said earlier, you're a ferret. We have to find out what are the responsibilities of our local government and what are the responsibilities of other governmental units. If education is not part of a local municipal policy, then go to the school board. Another question that was asked dealt with affordable housing. We know that housing costs are up, and one question is, what can you do to bring about affordable housing in our city? Well, one candidate responded, I believe in rent controls. Well, let's just stop and think about it. Rent control is typically not a power that's vested in local government. Rent control is something that is special. It has to be something that's given to local government by the state. rent controls, and by and large, most municipalities here in the state of Michigan are illegal. You can't do it. So when we ask a question that involves exercising powers that are not given to local governments, then we've asked a bad question. We've asked an inappropriate question. So let's just stop and think about this. If you're going to be an effective resident, if you're going to be an effective voter, it means you have to work for it. It means you spend some time thinking about what's the role of government. Let's just kind of back up a little bit. Do you remember in high school when you took your civics class, or junior high, whatever it was? People's eyes glazed over. They didn't want to talk about civics. Oh, we're going to deal with government stuff again. But it's civics. It's what governs your life. It's civics. It's governance, public policy. It governs the success or the failure that you, your children, and your grandchildren may have. So dust off those old high school civics books. Dust off information there. And so you can look at, number one, the legal powers of government. And then number two, do some additional work looking at what are all these policies it means. Being a citizen in the United States requires that we work to be informed. It requires that we are ferrets when it comes to seeking out information. It requires that we are willing to understand the issues and that we're willing to compromise when we have to. Our nation was founded on the concept of compromise. Now, with compromises can be good, compromises can be bad, but compromise is essential. We can talk about some of those in a follow-on podcast. Now, when it comes to understanding about local elections, and we'll just deal with what are some good questions that you might want to consider asking a candidate for local office. One question that was not asked at this campaign forum, which I believe is very important, is how much is your campaign budget? Where are you spending the money, and what are you doing to tell the word out about you? Are you spending no money? Are you spending $10,000? Are you spending $100,000? There's no right or wrong answer for a candidate, but it's important for us to know what kind of financial resources the candidate is spending to get the word out. Now, if the campaign spending budget is very, very low, then the candidate may be depending upon individuals to work for him or her. If it's very high, then the next question is, where is the money going to be spent? Mail, electronic advertising, TV, radio? How are you going to spend the money? It's going to be on yard signs. So we want to know, what is the size of the budget? Caveat. This is really important. We do not judge by how much they're spending their campaign on, because it depends on the size of the government. It depends on how important it is to get the word out. But we do want to know how much they're going to spend. The next question, which is really related to this, which is really, it's an essential question, which is never asked, is who's giving you your money? Where does your campaign resources come from? I would encourage you, do not fall for the trap of saying, pick a number. My campaign is supported by, 1,000 people. Well, that sounds really impressive, but what if 900 people are giving $5 and you have 1 or 2 people giving the rest of the dollar amount? So we want to know, where does the money come from? Is it coming from 1 or 2 wealthy individuals? Is it coming from a union? Is it coming from a industry? Or is it coming from a public interest group, some kind of a lobbying group? One thing, this is why it's important, though, giving money to a political campaign. Now, I am not talking about graft and corruption. I'm saying that people give money because they want access to meet the candidate. So if somebody gives you a lot of money so that you can buy literature, gives you money so you can buy yard signs, and they ask to could you have coffee with me? I have a couple of questions. Odds are you'll say what? Yes. Now, contributions are a form of access, and they are a form of showing, I ask you to support my policy, my program. That's why it's really critical for us to understand, where does the money come from? If the money comes from a political party, that raises other kinds of questions. If you're dealing with a local election, most municipal elections are nonpartisan. You don't run as a Republican or a Democrat or a Green or whatever. But if the money's come from one political party, then they're going to use that office. They're going to politicize that office so that it achieves the objectives of that particular political party. It's critical to know, where is the money coming from. Again, finances are essential ways to get our information out about a candidate or about a public policy issue. So we want to know, where is it coming from? Another question to ask a candidate, and this is really significant, is what alliances are you a member of? Are you a member, even if it's a nonpartisan independent election, who is supporting you? Where does your support come? Are you supporting another candidate? Are you two running together with a similar public policy position? So, are you running totally independently? Are you running with allies in the campaign? What is your relationship with other elected officials? So we want to understand the political alliances of the candidate. Let me just restate that a little bit. It's important to understand whether or not a candidate for public office has alliances or associations with other candidates and with other elected officials. Because if you know those alliances, then you can begin to understand the true political preferences, true policy preferences of a candidate. So that's what we want to do, is to be able to understand those kinds of issues. One last question that might be kind of interesting to ask. Now, if you're a ferret, you're going to go to dark places. And a lot of times candidates don't want you to shine onto dark places. One question to ask is, tell me about your legal background. Have you been charged with a crime? Have you served time in jail? That answer lets you determine what's about the background of that individual. If the individual's been guilty of a crime, spent time in jail, do you want to give that individual control over the budget? It's an important question to know. And also understand, too, that sometimes, the political process does wash over into the judicial process. We don't like it, but occasionally it does. But a question is, what have you done legally? Has the state, has the city, has the national government chosen to take you to court because of actions that you've taken? Now, this is an important question because you may have done something in one state, but you're running for office in a different state. So we have to look at the individual's background, the full background. So now we're looking at their legal issues. Now, another question you might want to ask your candidate is, have you been involved in a legal dispute with the current city government? Not necessarily a bad thing, but we want to know, has the candidate taken legal action, has sued the current government? If they have, you want to understand what were the conditions. If they have not, that's important to know. So we want to understand what has been the nature of the relationship between the candidate and the current government for which they're seeking office. So what we're saying is that as we look at local government, as we look at casting ballots during this election season, our call is to be informed. Our call is to work. Now, work, we think, I have my job, I come home, I don't have to work anymore. No. Our task is to work to understand the issues, the priorities of our candidates, Our task is to understand the issues and the background from policy questions that are on. If the city is imposing a tax levy, what is it about? How's it going to be spent? How they spent previous money? Those are all important questions. So those are things that we have to really, really think about. So an informed voter is a voter who has made a commitment to work for our political system. An informed voter has made a commitment to work to understand and know the issues. An informed voter is somebody who has chosen not just to come home from work and flick on the television and veg out. That is not our call. So one thing we'll talk about. We have several things we want to talk about in upcoming issues. If you like us, please like us. Please subscribe. We have several things I want to talk about. In the future, I'll be interviewing all of the candidates, inviting them to an interview for candidates for mayor, each candidate for city council. We want you to spend some time. I will not tell them the questions in advance. And I pledge not to ask gotcha questions. I just want to ask questions that are informative, that will allow you as a voter to understand. We'll spend some time looking at some other policy issues for governments here in Farmington Hills, Southeast Michigan, and other questions that are around the country. So I'm aware of issues in terms of law enforcement, issues in terms of economic development, issues in terms of tariffs. We have a lot of questions to talk about, and we'll be hosting individuals to come in to share their thoughts. So again, thank you for tuning in. We ask you to subscribe so that you can be aware of future podcasts and about the topics that we're going. But we make a pledge that we will not ask gotcha questions. We will not center our questions to necessarily discredit somebody. We just want to know the facts. Years and years ago, decades ago, in fact, with an old detective here on TV, the sergeant said, "Just the facts, ma'am, just the facts." And that's what we want to do, is to work to discover just the facts and make those facts available to you. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe, and I'll look forward to talking with you in the future. This is T.R. Carr, host of I Can See Clearly Now.